I do want to shake your hand, so I'm going to reach out to you, shake hands. Stay a little bit further back because I have to keep a 6-foot distance from the screen. Otherwise, I understand you'll catch a computer virus. And there's a reputation that I have for telling bad jokes, and you now see that it's true. Hopefully, you've all printed out the handouts that I sent to you. There should be 3 handouts. One of them is an SAT, ACT, PSAT workshop, which I'll hold up like that so you can see it with this lovely little zooming effect. And I love parents and students to have this printed out. And then there was also a 2-page reading comprehension assignment, which I know some of you didn't do, but hopefully some of you did. The students were supposed to print that out because there'll be one point where I'll ask a couple of questions about that, and that'll be your opportunity to participate. There's 3 different things I'm going to be focusing on today. I'm going to be talking about myths and facts about the SAT, ACT, PSAT exams. And when I talk about the SAT and PSAT, the tests are mostly identical. Where there are differences, I will point them out, but mostly they're the same, so I can talk about one and then we're talking about the other at the same time. Then I'm going to talk about 4 different ways of beating the exam. Now, the reason why I want parents here is for the first part, when I talk about myths and facts about the exams, I'm going to be giving guidance that will be helpful to the parents as well as to the students, so it's good for you to be here. And then the second part, where I talk about the different ways of trying to beat the SAT and ACT exams, well, it's sort of good for the parents to also get a feel for what I'm like. People often ask me, why are you doing a free workshop? Like, what is the catch? Like, while we take the test, are you going to sneak up behind us and steal our pocketbooks and run? I used to. I can't anymore. This is Zoom. And besides which, even then, it's like I got too slow and people were catching me. There is no catch to this. This is entirely free. But the only thing I ask of you is that you pay attention to the way I teach. I am the instructor for our courses. I don't pass you off to anybody else who I gave a crash course in my methods, which means that you're getting to test drive the person with whom you would work should you choose to take our course. What I'm hoping at the end of this is that you're going to say, I really like this course. I think he's great. I want to take it. And then I'll give you the information at the end of the course to do so. I know a few of you are already registered. But if at the end of the course, you can't stand me, or having these close-ups in Zoom makes you realize just how ugly I am, and you just can't bear to have to look at this for months, well, it didn't cost you anything, and you still got a free class out of it. So just pay attention. That's the only catch to today's workshop. What can you call me? You can call me Dr. Jeff. You can call me Dr. Roth. If you can call me Jeff, you can call me Hey You. I don't care what you call me as long as it's clean. If it's got dirty words in it, please make sure you're muted because my feelings bruise very easily. I usually like to start these workshops by dispelling some myths. And the first one, if you take a look at the outline you have, is, do these tests measure something important? People believe they measure something important. For instance, some people believe that these exams measure your intelligence. No, they don't measure your intelligence. There are things out there that they call IQ tests, and people think that IQ tests measure your intelligence, but they don't really either. What IQ tests measure, there was some psychologist decades ago who made up something that he called IQ. And then after he made up this thing he called IQ, he then made up IQ tests to measure the thing that he just made up. But do IQ tests really tell you how smart you are, what you're capable of achieving in this world? No. If they don't, certainly the SAT and the ACT, they don't measure your intelligence. Every one of you can think of somebody you know who you think is the biggest moron on the planet. And yet that person does really well on the standardized tests, and you hate his guts for it. And every one of you can think of somebody you know who's reasonably bright, does well in school, and has difficulty with these standardized tests. 60% of you are saying, yeah, that's me. Not in that voice, but I like to do voices sometimes. These tests do not measure your intelligence. Another thing that people think that these tests measure is how well you are going to do in college. Well, you would think if all the colleges in the country are requiring these tests, they should at least predict how well you're going to do. But even that's not true. Right after this workshop is done, you could drive over to the University of Miami, break into the Otto Richter Library, which I don't suggest you do. It's better to get an alumni card and wait until they officially open again. And you can look at the journal articles, and you'll find that there have been dozens of studies that have been done to correlate performance on the SAT and ACT with performance in your first year in college. And usually those studies find anywhere between a 10 and a 20% correlation. That's not a high correlation. if I were to do a research study and try to correlate your performance on the SAT with your shoe size, I would probably find a 10 to 20% correlation. Why? Because as you get older, your foot gets bigger, which therefore means your shoe size gets bigger. Also, as you get older, you learn more words and you learn more math, and your scores will go up. So if they're both going up at the same time, there will be a correlation of 10 to 20%. Does this therefore mean that your SAT score is designed to predict your shoe size? If you all want to press your space bar and say, no, it doesn't, go for it. Chirp, chirp. Chirp,
No.
chirp. Okay, I get one person, thank you. Does it mean that your shoe size is designed to predict your ACT score? What do you think?
No.
No, thank you. So usually I get a whole classroom of people yelling at no simultaneously, and I get to feed off the energy. So right now it's like, it's up to you guys to bring the energy up to my levels, or to whatever level you feel comfortable with without exploding. Statistics can lie about anything. Now, why do I like to bring this up at the very beginning of my workshops? Because I hate what happens when the scores come in. Almost every one of you has taken the PSAT. Some of you have taken the SAT or ACT. And as soon as those scores come in, everybody starts comparing each other. Oh, how did he do? How did she do? How did you do? And they start thinking that it means anything about who you are, what you're capable of achieving. Oh my gosh, I did better than him. I'm gonna go to Yale. It's like they don't have anything to, and by the way, you can see I'm a little bit insane, but again, truth in advertising, better for you to see that now. These tests do not measure your intelligence. They do not measure how well you're going to do in college, but I hate that people compare each other and think it tells you anything about who you are, what you're capable of achieving. Truth is, your performance in 4 years of high school is far more predictive as to how well you'll do in 4 years of college than a test that you take at 8 o'clock in the morning when you're half asleep on a Saturday. So what do these tests measure? Well, they measure two things. Number one, they measure how well you'll do in another test made by the same companies, the ACT organization and the College Board, which is also known as ETS, Evil Testing Service. They claim that the E stands for educational, but we all know the truth. How well you do on the PSAT should have a high correlation with how well you do on the SAT. How well you do on the pre-ACT should have a high correlation with how well you would do on the ACT. How well you do on the SAT and ACT will actually have a reasonably high correlation with how well you would do on the GRE or the GMAT or the LSAT, which are tests that you have to take if you want to get into graduate school or business school or law school, respectively. The other things that these measure is how well you think like the test makers. The analogy I like to use is something called the Herald Hunt, formerly known as the Tropic Hunt. If you've ever done the Herald Hunt, I'll explain to you what it is. You'll know it's crazy. It's a hunt that's put on every year or two by the Miami Herald, usually in November, where you get about 10,000 people running through some part of town trying to solve clues created by Dave Barry, the author and humor columnist. And if you've ever read anything that Dave Barry wrote, you know that the guy is absolutely, certifiably insane. The last time they called it Tropic Hunt, my wife and I, we won the hunt. Trip for 4 people on the Norwegian Cruise Lines for 7 days, 7 nights. I put on 20 pounds on the cruise. I've put on another 30 pounds since then. I'm going to stand up just so you can imagine what I used to look like when I was 50 pounds lighter. People would sneeze and I'd be blown down half a block away. I didn't worry about hurricane season. I worried about allergy season. So we solved this thing. And after they brought us to the stage, everybody sees what we look like. They start telling us how the puzzle was supposed to be solved. And now my team is trying to walk back to our cars. And every 1 minute, somebody stops and says, "This was the hardest hunt ever. You guys are geniuses." And I kept on saying, this has nothing to do with us being smart. The fact that we were able to win this hunt means that we are able to think like the crazy human being known as Dave Barry, which means you should be very afraid of us. But part of the goal of the Herald Hunt is thinking like the guy who made the puzzles and solving them the same way he made them. Part of the goal of the SAT and ACT is thinking like the horrible human beings who make these tests and solving the problems the same way that they made them. And to the extent that I or anybody else can help you to think like these people, A, you will do better on the exams, and B, you will later need an exorcist to get rid of the evil spirits that are implanted within you, which is why you go to Barnes & Noble. They have a book on how to exorcise in your own home. be gone, be gone. You get a workout and the spirits leave, it's all good. Told you, bad humor. I want to make sure that I live up to or down to my reputation. So why do the colleges require the SAT and ACT exams? I mean, if they measure your shoe size, if they don't do a particularly good job of predicting how well you do in college, they don't measure your intelligence, why would they require them? Well, for two reasons. Number one, they call it the great equalizer. I have an Alfonso from Coral Reef, and I have a Pedro from Belen, both here at this workshop today. They don't know whether Alfonso's 3.0 at Coral Reef is the same as Pedro's 3.0 at Belen. Maybe at Coral Reef, the teachers are horrible, which they're not, and I want to make sure to state that since there's a teacher here who's actually watching right now. And maybe the teachers at Belen are amazing, in which case the person who's at Coral Reef, their 3.0 is far more impressive than the one from Belen. Or maybe at Belen, they have a 4.0 grading scale, and at Coral Reef, they have a 6.0 grading scale, in which case that 3 out of 4 is more impressive than the 3 out of 6. Things changed in the last 2-3 decades. Back in my day, when you had to walk uphill to school, and you had to walk uphill coming home from school, and it was snowing in Miami in the middle of the summer. It was always worse in my day. Back in my day, there was only a 4.0 grading scale. Now the GPAs are all over the place. There's Ransom Everglades. I don't think I have anybody from Ransom here. They have a 12.0 grading scale. There's some other smaller private school somewhere in South Florida that has a 20.0 grading scale. How are the colleges supposed to interpret the gradings, the GPAs, if they're all over the place? And even if they come up with some sort of a grading scale, how do you decide that somebody who has a B+ in a regular class is the same as somebody who has an A- in an honors class, or vice versa? You can't. Similarly, back in my day, you wouldn't watch the news every other week and see a story talking about the differences in the quality of education from school A to school B to school C. But now you hear about it all the time. The whole principle behind Jeb Bush's voucher program. Sorry, I'm not going to tell you whether I agree or disagree with the voucher program. There are two things you do not discuss in Miami. One of them is politics. The other one is Elian Gonzalez. And those of you who were alive at that time, you know what I'm talking about. But the principle behind the voucher program is people at this school are not doing so well. Let's give them money to go to this school instead. George W. wanted this on a national scale, and nobody would have even dreamed that something like this was necessary back in my day. But the SAT and the ACT, they call them the great equalizers, because everybody's taking the same test at the same time, on the same day, under the same conditions. It can be a horrible, horrible test, and it is. But at least they can pretend that everybody has an equal chance of doing well in these exams, which helps them to sleep better at night. So that would be one of the reasons why the colleges require the SAT and ACT. Now, I'm going to tell you about another reason in just a moment, but I'd like you to pull out that wonderful little handout that I held up to you before, this thing. Everybody should grab for this now. And the first question, I'm going to read it to you. I'd like you to answer it. It says, in the left blanks, rank the liberal arts colleges below from number 1, highest, to number 4, lowest. What I've done is I've taken information from 4 schools from the latest version of this book, the U.S. News and World Report. They put an annual Best Colleges book out. And I've taken information about 4 of the schools there, which I'm not telling you the names there because then you'll be biased. I'm telling you whether or not they require the SAT or ACT exam, or whether it's just an optional thing. And I'm telling you the 25 to 75 percentile of scores for people getting into those schools. For instance, school A, they do require the exams for you to apply to their schools. 25th to 75th percentile says that the SAT scores are 1370 to 1510, or ACT scores between 31 and 33. This means that 50% of all people who get into that school have scores within that range. It also means 25% of the people who get into the school have scores higher than that range, and 25% of scores lower than that range. So what I'd like you to do, in the blanks all the way to the left, if you think you can identify which one of those schools is probably ranked highest of the 4 in this book, put a 1. The one that you think is ranked second highest of them, put a 2, and then a 3. And then the one you think is lowest ranked of the 4, put a 4. I'll give you about 30 seconds to come up with rankings, and then I'll go back to talking. While you're filling it out, I'll give you Jeopardy music. There you go. We're all back, contestants. And I apologize for doing that cough over that high note. I shouldn't cough in this day and age. Don't worry, you didn't catch anything. So now I'm going to go back to my question from before about why colleges require them. The second reason why they require them is public perception. For instance, I'm guessing that most of you ranked the top one school on the list as school A. Why? Because they have really super high SAT scores. And I'll tell you, school A is a great school. It's Vassar. If any of you are curious, where it says school and rank on the right, you can put the information in. That's Vassar. It's located in New York. And in the most recent rankings, they're tied for 14th on that list. Most of you probably said C is the lowest on the list. That's what usually happens when I'm doing this live. And then my response would be, wrong! Actually, that school is ranked higher than school A. It's ranked 6th on the list. That one is Bowdoin College, Bowdoin, located in Maine. They have not required the SAT or ACT since the early 1970s. They're a great school, but for all of you who said A must be the highest and C must be the lowest, I want you to take a look at that public perception, that the higher the SAT scores, the higher the ACT scores, the better the school must be. And school C, they don't even require it. Oh, they have no standards whatsoever. They'll take anybody. The schools are deathly afraid of this, that you will stop respecting them if they don't require these scores. Alumni will stop sending money in because you're not the school I used to go when you had standards. They'll go down the college rankings. The college rankings are actually in part determined on SAT and ACT scores of incoming freshmen. So the fact that Bowdoin is always higher on the list than all the other schools they have listed here makes it even more impressive. But that public perception is why it doesn't matter how many times they've tried to get rid of the SAT and ACT, they haven't succeeded. Now, there are schools that don't require the exam. And for those of you who are going into your junior year, more schools than ever before for next year are considering making SAT and ACT an optional test rather than a mandatory one. Not all of them are. For instance, University of Miami is still planning to make it a requirement. Some schools are going optional. Now, just closing up the list, B and D, you'll notice they have almost identical SAT and ACT scores, very similar ranges, but they have very different rankings. School B is ranked 17th on the list, while school D is ranked 117th on the list, despite the fact that their scores are so similar. School B is the U.S., for those of you who are curious, the U.S. Naval Academy, located in Maryland. And school D is Westmont College, located in California. Next thing on my list, how do the colleges look at the exams? Well, first of all, again, show of hands, pretend that you're actually in a live class, and stick your hand up. How many of you know that the colleges start averaging your scores after you've taken the test 3 times or more? Hold your hands up. Okay, well, I'm holding my hands up, but it's a lie. Those of you who did raise your hand or were thinking of it, but you just didn't want to, I don't know any colleges that actually average your scores after 3 times. It's one of the biggest myths that they do that. You could take the test 6 times, and the vast majority of colleges do what's called super scoring, where they take the highest of each. So if you took the test in March, right before they closed down giving tests for the season, and you got an 800 in the verbal section, and a 300 in math. 800 is the highest score you could get, 200 is the lowest. And then you take the test again in October, but during the summertime, you got heat stroke and your brain flipped upside down, and now you get a 300 in the verbal and an 800 in the math in October. Most of the colleges, all the ones that are doing super scoring, will look at your high 800 in verbal from March and your high 800 in math from October and say, oh, 1600, perfect score. We want to take this student. It works to your advantage because it means it doesn't hurt you to take the test more than once. It works to their advantage because these are the numbers that they report to the boards that rank them, and then they look artificially higher than they otherwise would. The ACT, I'm going to momentarily move away slightly from that. The ACT has announced that they're going to be trying to intentionally create an option for super scoring on their forms. The first time you take the ACT starting this upcoming year, you take the full test. After that, they're saying that you can do selective sections. You can choose to retake in 1 section or 2 sections instead. I caution anybody who is considering taking a partial ACT in the future, I would not recommend it. Since most schools super score, not all of them do. Some of them will just take the highest single sitting. But since most of them do, it doesn't typically hurt you to take the full test again, even if one of your numbers goes down. But we don't know how many schools will honor it. Not all schools superscore ACT scores. And just because the ACT says we're going to make it so that you can take one section over, it doesn't mean that all the colleges in the country are going to say, oh, well, if the ACT organization wants to do it, we're going to do it too. They have their own minds. They don't always follow suit. So my opinion would be that you should always take the ACT in full. Another thing that people think about how the colleges look at the exams is that the essay does not matter. Both of the exams have an optional essay that you take at the end of the exams. They say it's optional. I don't think anybody should ever, no matter how many times you take the SAT or ACT, you should never leave the essay out. First of all, they'll make it up. Usually they'll have you do some sort of an experimental extra section at the end if you're not doing it with the essay. But some schools have said that if you do not take it with the essay, we won't consider your scores at all. Harvard had that policy. The last time I spoke to them was a year ago, and they had that policy then, that if you took the test once and you got a great score with the essay, and then you take the test again and your regular score, your short answer scores went higher, but you didn't do with the essay, we won't look at it. My son was homeschooled, and every year he had to take an SAT or ACT at the end of the year in order to get an annual evaluation. He took the ACT in 8th grade, and he got a really good score. And when he started applying for college, he's finishing up his sophomore year in college now, I started calling up some schools, like I called up University of Florida, and I said, your policy is that anything within the last 4 years is good. So is his ACT from 8th grade good? And they said, yes. And I was about to hang up the phone when they said, as long as he did it with the essay, because if he didn't do it with the essay, we won't look at it at all. He didn't want to do it with the essay, so it didn't count. So those are the major things that I want to talk about with how the colleges look at those exams. I'll stop again. Spacebar time. Anybody want to ask me a question?
Which one would you say is roughly longer?
They're both long tests. You will be in there for about 4 hours no matter which test you take. What I usually suggest for the people who take my course is that towards the end of the course, I want them to take the SAT and the ACT twice. With superscoring, ideally, either the SAT or the ACT, they got the scores that they want already, and then they're done. And if they did it in their junior year, which the majority of people take it in the junior year, some take it in sophomore year, some take it in senior year. If you get the scores you want, superscored in your junior year, then in your senior year, you wipe your hands of it. You can focus on your college essays instead and keeping your grades up. And you can laugh at all your friends who are still taking the exam, although I don't suggest that because that's a good way to lose friends. Trust me, I know from experience. Then if you don't like how you did, or you think that you did well, but you want to push it to the next level, I usually say, look at which test you did better on. And the one you took that you did better on, that's the one that you would keep on studying, and you ignore the one you did worse on. The majority of schools will take the SAT or the ACT. And when you check your colleges, if all the colleges you're applying to will take either test that you want to send, then it makes more sense to continue to work on your stronger test and pull it up to the next level. Rather than, let's say I got an SAT score here and an ACT score here. Why would I then say, oh, I'm going to put my energy towards pulling this up to what I already achieved on the SAT, when instead I could try to pull this more impressive score up another level and become even more impressive. So that would be if you wanted to continue. I wouldn't focus so much on the length. I would focus more on where I'm stronger. And a lot of people, when they come into my course, they insist, oh, I'm stronger on, a lot of people say the SAT because they hate the science section on the ACT. And then at the end of the course, they say, OMG, I did better on the ACT, a lot better. And that becomes their favorite test. You don't really know what will emerge as your strength, but that's more important than saving an extra 20 or 30 minutes on one test or the other. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, another one. Fire away.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. What do you recommend if someone is stronger in the language, arts, like English, not math? Should they even consider the ACT or just focus on the SAT? Or like you just said, it's a good thing to take both you never know. What do you recommend?
I focus more on that last thing that you said. It's a good thing to take both because you never know. I'm going to use you as a segue to that's the next thing that's actually on my outline, where it talks about the differences between the exams. And so thank you. It's like I'll send you the extra $10 for asking that question later. There's very little differences between these exams. They both have a grammar section, which is where the language arts would come in. They both have a reading comprehension section. They both have math, and 95% of the math that's on one test is on the other test as well. I used to do an SAT course, and I had an add-on ACT course that people could take afterwards so I can cover all the differences. I don't even bother. My course covers both tests simultaneously because 90% of everything, 95% of everything I do is applicable to both tests. Even the science section on the ACT develops skills for the reading comprehension and for math chart interpretation problems on the SAT. The biggest differences between the exams are that the ACT has a science reasoning section, which the SAT does not. And for people who hate science, be aware that 37 of the 40 questions in the exam, you don't really need to know science. You have to be able to quickly find information embedded in descriptions of experiments and lots of charts and graphs. The SAT, their essay is a rhetorical analysis, while the ACT, the essay is a argumentative essay. And the SAT has one section where you don't have any options for multiple choice that you have to fill in a blank, while the ACT does not have that section. The other big difference, and this actually for the young lady who asked the question a few moments ago, with regards to length, the length isn't actually as important as the time that they give you per section. The ACT gives you about 70% to 75% of the time that the SAT gives you per section. So for people who are slower workers, the SAT has an advantage. For people for whom they can move at the pace that they need to on these exams, both tests are at the same level. But since both of them cover the language skills, and everything I teach for one of them in the grammar section is true for the other test as well, I don't think one of them actually wins the ACT SAT battle. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anybody else before I move on?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
I'm going into my senior year, and I've already taken the SAT and ACT, and I did better on the SAT.
Okay.
And I wanted to know if you knew anything about like the upcoming schedule, because I know that they were talking about maybe having one in October, but I don't know if you can.
Tell you what, I'm going to hold off on that for about 7 or 8 minutes, because I'm going to be, the last thing in Roman numeral 1 on the outline is when should you take the test and how often to take the tests. Also on my website, you can see the current course schedule of tests. If you go to higherstandards.biz, you'll see something which says test schedules. If you hit the test schedules, you'll be able to see something you can print, download, or just reference. It lists all the test schedules for the year. I would also say that you said that you did better on the SAT. Make sure that you're looking at concordance tables that show how SAT and ACT compare. I have a lot of people who will call me up and say, I did a lot better on this test than that. And when I look at the tables that compare them, they actually wound up doing the same on both tests, but they didn't know how to compare. So as long as you're looking at the concordance tables, we're good. Are you doing that?
Yes.
All right, then we're good. So let's see, other differences between the exams. Well, let's talk about the difference between the PSAT and the SAT exam. A lot of people believe the PSAT is easier than the SAT, although some people think the SAT is easier than the PSAT. And usually just ask the person who's telling you this which one they did better on, because the one that they did better on is the one that they'll say is easier. The PSAT and the SAT are aimed to be at the same level of difficulty, although they sometimes will put a few more months of math content onto the SAT, since you ostensibly are taking it a few months later in your high school journey. But other than that, the two tests are pretty much identical, save that the PSAT does not have an essay and the SAT does. Let's talk about scholarships. If you go to my website and you click on where it says FAQ, a lot of information will be there, including something about scholarships. With regards to the SAT and the ACT, the big kahuna scholarship that all of us in Florida care about is the Bright Futures Scholarship. I can give you the current schedule. I'm going to use my little sheet of paper here. It's my cheat sheet. For your class, there are two scholarships. There is the FMS. For that one, you would need to have a 1210 on the SAT or 25 on the ACT. And I point out that this too is super scored, which means that if you're not quite there and there's one section you did particularly poorly on, focus on that. And if you pull it up, then you can get your scholarship. You need to get those score numbers, and you would have to have a 3.0 weighted GPA based upon Florida state standards. That means certain academic courses are the only ones that apply. And if you can achieve those plus some community service hours, you can get about 77% of your tuition paid in Florida state schools. Or they'll apply the average amount that they would have given in the state school if you go to a private school in the state of Florida. For the FAS, which is the higher of the two scholarships, your numbers would have to be a 1330 SAT or 29 ACT, again, super scored. And you'd have to have a 3.5 weighted GPA, again, based upon Florida state standards, so only certain courses apply. And that gives you 100% of the scholarship, plus they have been giving a $300 book stipend, although they're talking about eliminating that in the current legislative session. I don't know if they've already passed anything with that yet. There's also scholarships based upon 11th grade PSAT performance. If you're going into 10th grade, I have a few of you who are going to 10th grade next year who are here. The PSAT this year is the only purpose of the PSAT is primarily to give you practice for the SAT exam. In fact, some people will tell you the first time you take an SAT and you go in to pay for it, you should just do it cold without any training just to see how you do. I don't think that makes sense. A, the PSAT is your sample test. You've already done that. And B, I just want you to imagine if somebody told you that advice for your first driving test. The first time you go in for a driving test, no, don't get any training. Just go and try it just to see how you do. And after you mow down 3 little old ladies who are pushing their granddaughter in a cart across the street, and then you spend 20 years in prison for doing that, you will realize that maybe you should have gotten the training for driving before you practiced it. I feel the same way about SAT and ACT. Don't do it cold. Get your training, be on top of it, and then go and take the test when you know that you're a stronger candidate to do well on it. 11th grade PSAT, there are some scholarships based upon it. There's one for African Americans, there's one for Hispanic Americans. If that fits your particular family background, you'll want to find out what the criteria is the year in which you'll be graduating. And then the big one is the National Merit Scholarship. Very difficult to get. On average, you'd have to have in the low 700s in both of the sections or higher to even have a shot at getting the National Merit Scholarship. So if I have somebody coming into my course and they already have a score at around 1200, I say, you're in shooting range. You might want to see if you can aim for the National Merit Scholarship as well. If somebody's coming into my course with a 900 score on the SAT, I'm not saying don't try for it if you want to, but it's a really tough hill to climb, and I'd say it's better for you to focus long-term on the SAT and the ACT, where you can be aiming for the Florida Bright Future Scholarship. That would be the more important goal, in my opinion. Other things about scholarships. Apply for the Bright Future Scholarship when you're in your senior year, even if you plan to attend University of Alaska, because it's as far away from your parents as you think you can get. And for those students who are right now chuckling and saying, yeah, I want to get as far away as possible, I just want to tell you right now, if you're feeling that way about your parents, I promise you, they feel that way about you also. If one person's annoying, the other one's annoying them back. It's just a closed circuit. But let's say you want to go to the University of Alaska, apply for the Bright Future Scholarship anyway. Because the thing is, it's good for 5 years after you graduate. It was 2 years, but they've now upped it. It's still there if you decide to come back. So suppose you're at University of Alaska, and 2 years down the line, you have 3 startling revelations. Number 1, it's cold here. I liked the warmth back in Florida. Number 2, my friends are all back in Florida. The Penguins don't want to play with me. And the most startling third revelation of all, you know something? I think I do love my parents after all. I want to be closer to them. Well, if you're thinking that 2 years down the line while at University of Alaska, if you applied for the Bright Future Scholarship while you were a senior in high school, it's still waiting for you. You can come back. You've got the scholarship. However, the moment you graduate from high school, it doesn't matter whether you had the scores for it. You're no longer eligible. So apply for it before the end of your senior year. The worst that happens is you get a paper cut while you're filling out the forms, and that's not a big problem unless you're a hemophiliac, in which case, okay, we'll have to talk after the workshop. Anybody want to ask me anything about the scholarships? Now's the time. I'll give another 10 seconds.
You said something about the FMS scholarship.
Okay.
Is it just like Bright Futures, but with a lower SAT score?
Yes, exactly. The FMS and the FAS are the two versions of the Bright Future Scholarship. The FMS is not quite as stringent in terms of the requirements as the FAS, but the FAS gives 100% of your tuition, and the FMS gives about 77%.
So if I get the 1210, I'll get the FMS guaranteed.
Well, if you get the 1210, if you have a 3.0 weighted GPA, and they're also based upon the classes they want, you can actually speak to your high school guidance counselor, and they can guide you not just on what your GPA is, but what your GPA is for the purpose of the Bright Future Scholarship. And there's also community service hours. But yeah, if you have that, then you apply for it, and you'll be able to get it. It's one of the nice things about the state of Florida currently. I never know what they're going to do. And by the way, as long as we're bringing up those numbers, in the past, they had numbers that would be locked in place for several years. They're now saying every couple of years they're going to reevaluate these numbers. For instance, those friends of yours who are seniors right now and about to graduate, the scores were higher for them on both the SAT for the FMS and the FAS, and they were higher on. Okay, I just said it the wrong way. They were lower. They were easier criteria for the SAT, and for the ACT. One of the scholarships, it was easier. One of the scholarships, it was harder. They changed them every year or two now. They're going to be doing that in order to fit whatever the current percentiles are in the state of Florida. Did I answer your question fully, as well as go way past that, Ibrahim?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Sold! And now I can work on eBay. The next thing on my list is the last thing in Roman numeral 1. When and how often to take the tests? Well, first of all, I just want to caution you. Sometimes people will hear me say that, oh, the colleges will look at your highest of each. You can take the test 6 times and it'll show up on your forms. Oh, another thing I want to bring up. This notion that because you can take the test 6 times and they'll all show up in your forms. And it's up to the colleges how to look at it. The SAT came up with something about 3 years ago called score choice, which means that if you take the test in March and in October, and you hate your October scores, you can choose to tell them, I don't want you to report the October scores. Just report the March one and the next ones that I take. I strongly encourage you, never use that. For the same reason I was talking about the ACT's recent change, you don't know what colleges are going to do. Some colleges have said that if you don't report all your scores, they consider it a form of academic dishonesty, and they will disqualify you from candidacy for your school. Since the majority of them are doing super scoring anyway, it doesn't hurt you, but it could potentially hurt you if you repress one of your scores and they find out, which in the information age is so easy to find things out. So sometimes when people will hear me talk about that, and they'll say, oh, well, then I'll take every test. I'll take it in March, I'll take it in May, I'll take it in June, I'll take it in October. Actually, August, September, October, November, December. Why not? Sounds like fun. Okay, most of you don't think it's fun. I do. Every couple of years, I go and I take the SAT for fun just to see what it's like. I remember I did it when my son was in 5th grade, and it was the first time he went in with me to take the test. It was the first time he took the SAT, and people thought he was coming in to try the cheat. He was the youngest one. I was the oldest one. They tried to lead me to my seat thinking that I had been left behind 30 times. And they thought that he was there to try, he was some prodigy there to try to help me to cheat. So they separated us into different rooms. I don't suggest you just keep on retaking the test over and over and over again. A, because you don't think it's fun. And B, because I think you're sending a subtle message to the colleges that you're not a student who likes to study. You just want to keep on taking it over and over again. You're hoping that one of those times fairies from the dwarf planet Pluto will come down to Earth and they'll sprinkle magical dust onto your test, causing the scores to go up 500 points. If you believe in fairies from Pluto who want your scores to go up, more power to you. This is the United States. Freedom of belief. It's one of our core values. However, I don't want you to communicate to the colleges that the only thing upon which you are relying is Plutonian fairies. So if you're going to take the test again, it should be for a couple of reasons. Number one, the last time you took the test, horrible conditions. Maybe you had a 104-degree fever, or you didn't even know if you could have gone in to take the test because there was a coronavirus scare going on. I know the March exams, I have seen a trend that people did not do quite as well as they normally do. And I wouldn't be surprised if the anxiety that was starting to pick up then may have affected scores in March. Or maybe that annoying guy who goes, was sitting next to you the entire time you took the test and you couldn't focus. I was that annoying guy back in 2004. I had an allergy attack while I took the test. I felt bad for everybody around me. But now you know you didn't do well because of other things, and you should take the test again. The other reason to take the test again is because you've done additional studying. You know you're a stronger candidate to do well in the test. But just to do it over and over and over again, just without doing any additional preparation, doesn't make sense to me, and I think it sends the wrong message. Average is 2 to 4 times. Back in my day, again, walk uphill in the snow. Back in my day, you took the test once. They called these things back then aptitude tests. An aptitude is something that you're born with, you can never change no matter how much training you do, and you die with. And when every research study showed that it was possible to train for the SAT exam, they stopped calling it an aptitude test. Back in my day, you only took it once because you believed them that you couldn't change your scores. Nowadays, most people take the test from 2 to 4 times. That's normal. There's no badge of shame in it. In fact, there's a badge of honor because you took the test one time and then you did really well in most sections, but your science score was not where you want it to be. Then you focus your studies on that. If you could pull it up for all the schools that are super scoring, yay, it looks better for you. It's your advantage to take the test multiple times. Now, when you go to my website, there will also be a form which lists all the different dates, and I'm trying to find where I have my version of it. There it is, right over here. You can print this out on my website, and it lists when school year is supposed to start, when your spring break is, because I know that's the most important thing of all, and also when the exams are. The SAT, they have an ACT in June, ostensibly. They have it scheduled still, although they're already starting to hedge their bets by pointing out that some sites might choose not to actually host the ACT. So those of you who are registered for the ACT in June, I would suggest also get yourself registered right now for the July exam as another option in case June shuts down for your particular test site. But they're planning to have ACTs in July, in September, I'm just going to read it from here, in September, in October, in December, in February, in April, and in June. That's this upcoming school year. For the SAT, normally they don't have one in September, but they've decided to add one in there since they had to cancel 3 tests for some people and 2 for others. So the next exams that they're going to be having, they have one in August, they have one in September, they in October, in November, in December. I'm going to point out, for those of you who are going to be seniors next year, the October exams are typically the last ones you can take for the purpose of early admission decisions. Going up to the December exams will be good for almost every school deadline, and sometimes even the ones in February and March are good for school deadlines. You have to check with each of your individual schools. And for those of you, I know I have 2 of you who are attending here who I work with your oldest sibling. Never assume that what was true for your older sibling just 2 years ago is still true today, because every year the colleges reevaluate their policies for what they're looking for and also when their deadlines are. And then for the purpose of Bright Future Scholarship, you can take the test all the way through to the end of your senior year. Even in June of your senior year, it's still applicable. So if you've got everything else for Bright Future Scholarship, even if you got accepted to a school, but you don't quite have the scores, keep on taking the test, because if you can push it up a little bit further, that's a lot of nice money that goes into your pocket for the purpose of going to college. Anybody have any questions about anything I said so far before I start talking about different ways to beat the test?
Yes.
Fire away.
So I'm a rising junior. I was wondering when will be the right time to start taking ACTs and SATs, like maybe like December or January. Is that a good time to start taking?
Yeah. We usually recommend that people take the test once or twice in the first half of their junior year. For the people who are rising seniors right now, if you haven't taken the test yet, you're a little behind schedule, and you'll want to take more of the exams that are going to be offered right now to try to catch up there. So I usually suggest take it once or twice in the first half of your junior year. If you're happy with your scores, you're done. If you're not, then you still have time to take the test of your preference one more time in the junior year. If you're happy, then you're done. If not, then you go and take it 1 or 2 more times in your senior year. So you're on schedule right now. You're good. Yes, I have another question.
Yes. So again, you're saying if you're upcoming junior, to take the test only once, like let's say, isn't it in November or December? I can't recall. Just once, and then in the spring, whatever, like come next year, they take the other test?
A lot of people will be doing that. They'll be doing just one in the first half of their junior year, and then they'll do another later on. I actually like to have people do it two in the first half of their junior year. The course,
Perfect.
if you take a look at my schedules, I have two course schedules, which we'll be looking at the end of the workshop, but one of them ends right before the October exams. So I want the students to take the October exams. Some of them will decide to take August or September as well, or some of them will decide to take October and then maybe do it again in November and December. Because you want to take the test around the time that you're most on top of your training. I have another course that will be starting in September, and that will be going through until the February ACT exam and the March SAT exam. And I will still be encouraging that they should take the test at least once along the way, the one at the end of the course and the one right beforehand, so that they now have two scores that they've taken. During my course, they also take two full practice tests that I assign, and sometimes they'll want to do an extra one or two on their own as well. So by the time they're done with their training and they've done all this, they've got two paid for SATs, two paid for SATs, and two practice tests of each in the course. They, by then, know pretty clearly which test they're stronger on if either one of them stands out. And the only time at that point I would recommend that somebody continue to take both tests is if some of the schools they're applying to say we only take the SAT, and some of the other schools they're applying to say we only take the ACT. If that's not the case, then they would stop at that point. Did I answer your question fully? And then
Yeah.
babble further?
Yeah, basically, just to make sure, you recommend to take it in October and in December, your junior year.
It depends on the person's situation. For instance, there's one private school in town that insists that all their students take the test in May for the SAT. And yet they say that to their students who are also taking 5 AP exams in May. I don't think it's to their advantage to take the SAT in May. It's not a one-size-fits-all pony. If you're going to be taking 4 or 5 AP exams, you shouldn't be studying for the AP test at the same time as you're studying for the SAT. So if for that school that requires them to do it, unless they say you're kicked out of our school, I say take it, but don't put your energies there. Put your energies for the June exam after you're done with your AP exams. Same thing, I don't want to give you a one-size-fits-all pony. If your son or daughter is athlete and the big games are in October, don't take the test in October because they're not going to be focused on studying. And what's going to affect your score far more than Plutonian fairies or a magical month, because some people are told that, oh, that month the test is easy and that month the test is hard. None of that's true. It's not like the people who work for the SAT organization say, let's make the October test really easy, but we'll stack it to them in November. They laugh that way because they're evil. I told you that earlier. And at this point now, there's going to be 2 people going to leave the workshop saying, okay, he's too insane for me. I hope not. But anyway, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all pony. My summer fall course is geared towards the October exams. And so I want everybody to be taking the October test at the very least, because that's when they've just learned everything they need to know. And I've kept them going right up until they take the test. And then I usually suggest they should take the test again soon after the course, or the one that came right before the October exam, so that way they have 2 tests under their belt. Did I answer you fully?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else before I dive on into the next thing on my outline?
Yes, I have a question.
Fire away.
I know that you said that for early application, most colleges need you to submit your applications in October, but
Or earlier.
yeah, I'm only planning on applying to Florida schools. So do you think they'll accept a December SAT score if I decide to take it?
My answer is always the same to that one. So my answer is you should always check with each of the colleges you're applying to find out. Most of the colleges in Florida, December would be fine. University of Florida used to have, I don't know if they are doing it this year, but they had an October deadline for all registrations that you had. The October was the last one. Check with them. That's the safest bet.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I think I'm going to dive into the next piece of the workshop. There are 4 different ways of trying to beat the exam: an academic approach, strategies and structure, what I call the devious approach, and also identifying a person's individual strengths and weaknesses. All of these are important for doing well on the test, though some of them matter more than others depending upon your strengths and weaknesses. For instance, let me go to the academics first, since that's the first thing on the list. The SAT is not all about tricks and strategies. There are facts you need to know. Show of hands, again, I won't be able to see it. How many of you are taking calculus or pre-calculus this past year or this upcoming year? Raise your hands. Okay, all of you are raising your hands. Good, great for you. I'm glad, and it's not in the exam. You can discard it from your brain for the purpose of the SAT and ACT. The SAT and ACT exam, they cover all of Algebra 1. They cover some geometry, although the cool thing about that is there's no proofs and there's no theorems. They have a tiny bit of trigonometry, and they'll go all the way back to elementary school. So you won't have to know complex calculus, but you will have to know what a remainder is. And for most of you, the last time somebody said the word remainder to you was when you were in 3rd grade approximately. The moment they told you of the existence of fractions and decimals, they stopped talking about remainders. So those of you who are really far in your math career, you're in calculus, advanced calculus, robotics, I don't know, what comes after calculus? Differential analysis, I believe. If you're in those things, great, but you might have further back in time to go to capture some of the things you learned a long time ago. But there are things that you need to know in the exam. Now, the higher your starting score in math, the less in need of the academic approach you probably are. If you have a 1200, let's say a 600 in math, you're probably pretty strong, but you can't blow off the academic approach completely, because I can guarantee you there are facts that you've overlooked. I worked with a student years ago. He came into the course with a 1430, and he insisted he had to take the course because he had a friend who had gotten a 1580, and he was not going to let his friend beat him. We worked together. We got him up to a 1570. I told him he should have been thrilled. He was mortified because his friend was still 10 points higher, so I recommended a good therapist to him. If any of you gets a 1570, please be happy. When we got the test results back, it was one of those times you could see the question and answer service. 80 points of his increase were attributable to just 3 math facts that we had covered that he had forgotten. So you have to still cover the math facts, even if you're strong with math. But if you have a score, let's say, of 350 in math, 500 is considered to be an average in each one of the 2 sections. If you have a score of 350, it's low. You are more in need of the academic approach. Maybe when you took it in school, you didn't absorb it, you had a horrible teacher, or as soon as you finished it, you forgot everything, in which case my job is to teach it to you again, maybe in a weird way that will stick in your head a little bit longer. And for those of you who are observing this class and don't have your mute button on, you probably can tell I'm all about doing something slightly weird. So hopefully it sticks in your head and then you can remember it for the exam. That would be academics and math. Academics in the grammar section would be learning the parts of speech and the punctuation rules. It is stunning how little people remember as to the difference between an adjective or an adverb, or what is a pronoun. And that's essential for doing well in the exam. So learning those, and when do you use a period, a semicolon, a comma mistakes all over the place in the exam. And every SAT and ACT, they will test to see if they can trick you with commas and versus semicolons on multiple problems. So boning up with just on those 2 things alone can help you to do well. And if you don't know the parts of speech, I'm going to recommend that you transport yourself back in time to when you were in 2nd grade. And I want you to either go online to watch the videos or rent from the library or from Netflix, Grammar Rock, also known as Schoolhouse Rock. And if you remember the song Conjunction Junction, what's your function? Which some of you have going on in your head right now, and some of you are chuckling. I can hear you, even though I can't hear you. That I would recommend that you watch those videos, because they're little 1.5-minute vignettes, but they teach you about the parts of speech. And if you understand the parts of speech, you'll be better able to identify how they're trying to trick you on the exam. It used to be for the reading comprehension section, I would talk about academics also, and the primary academics there was learning vocabulary. And it's good that I like it when I have parents at my workshops also, because it's good for you to hear it. I know that some of you students, you've been studying vocabulary lists in preparation for the SAT and ACT, and my opinion is don't study vocabulary lists anymore. It's a waste of your time. It used to matter. Like on the SAT, they used to have an antonyms section, which was very vocabulary based, an analogy section where you had to know the words to be able to see how they relate to each other, and then find 2 other words that also have the same relationship. And they had a sentence completion section where you had to figure out what word fits into a blank. They got rid of all those sections now. The only thing they have in the reading section is the reading. And they even said when they changed the SAT a few years ago, they said, we're no longer going to use words that people don't use. So in other words, they're dumbing down the language to words that most of you have heard before. So Yes, if you study a lot of vocabulary words, you'll find 3 or 4 of them on the exam. But I think it's a better use of your time to practice the skills and strategies you're going to be learning rather than trying to memorize a whole bunch of words that will probably not show up on the test. Academics in the science section. Well, people get afraid of the science section because they think that they have to know a lot of science. I'm telling you right now, if I had to know biology and chemistry and physics and astronomy and geology and all the other sciences, if I had to master all those, I would quit my job now. I like what I do, but I don't want to have to spend 5 years in school to try to memorize every single science fact on the exam. The fact is, anywhere between 36 and 38 of the questions in the ACT have nothing to do with anything you know about science. They just have to do with what's on the page. There will usually be 1 to 4 questions per exam that actually need to know something about science, but when you have to know it, it's usually the stuff that you're supposed to have had drilled into your head. Like, at what time of day are you likely to see the moon? Noon? 6 a.m.? Midnight? Or 6 p.m.? If you said midnight, you got it right because you understand the moon's phases. And then they've had a couple of times they've had questions about pH. If the pH level goes up, is it getting more acidic or more basic? So these are some of the facts that you might need to know in the exam, but you're not going to study 5 years of science to pick out the 2 or 3 things that might show up in the test that you're supposed to already know anyway. And that's academics. Strategies and structure. I'm going to pull up my handout because you're going to need this handout again. And I want to start off by talking about school versus SAT, ACT methods. See, no matter what your scores are, you need to know the right strategies for working on problems. You need to understand how the test is designed. And one of the things I want to point out is that for almost every question on these exams, there's a school way of doing the problem. And then there's also an SAT, ACT way of doing the problem. And they're not usually the same. So if, for instance, in math, you know both the school way and this alternative way, you have 2 ways of getting to the answer, doubles the chances you can get a question right. And some of the SAT, ACT ways are so much easier. For example, I would like you to take a look on your handout at question number 2, where it says, if X is bigger than 3, which of the following is equivalent to blah, 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 blah. Try to work it out. I'm going to write it on the board while you're working it out. This is the first time I get to actually write on the board today. Okay, I've written it on the board. If there's anybody who's looking at this question and you're saying, I don't know what the heck to do, I am stuck, I would like you to unmute, get onto the screen, and I'm going to help you to do it in an easier way. Hi, you and 2 other people are going to get the class, the gold stars for today for participating so much. So you're saying, I don't know what to do. So I'm going to teach you a strategy called plug-in. And first thing I want you to do, when you look at the answer choices on this problem, do you only see numbers or do you see something else besides just numbers?
Something else besides numbers.
What do you see?
Fractions.
And?
Variables.
Variables! Whenever you see variables in the answer choices on an SAT or ACT problem, it's a clue that you can use the strategy called plug-in, which basically means I don't want to do it your way. I don't want to use the algebra or the geometry, whatever you want me to do. I'm going to make up numbers. So I would like you to pick any number in the world that you think would be good for this problem. And tell me what it is.
2.
2? Okay. Now, I'm going to write 2 here, a 2 here, and a 2 here. You should write it over all the X's in the problem right now. And I want you to read me the problem with that number from the very beginning.
2 is greater than 3.
Stop. Is that true?
No.
Okay, then you can't use that number. When we make up numbers, we have to make sure to fit what they say the setup. Otherwise, the problem won't work. So I need to pick a new number that you think will work.
4.
Okay, let's try 4. I'm going to cross off the 2. I'm going to put 4 instead. And now it says 4 is bigger than 3. Is this true?
Yes.
So now the problem says, what is 1 over 4 plus 2? What's 4 plus 2? Because I'm really lost with this.
6.
Oh, thank you. So it's 1 over 6 plus 1 over 4 plus 3. What's 4 plus 3?
7.
7. Okay, thank you. I must be having a brain freeze or something like that. Now, on the ACT, or in most parts of the SAT math, all you would do now is punch this into your calculator, which is so much easier, don't you think? Anybody else who had trouble with this and is willing to help me finish this problem out?
Me?
Thank you, me. So, Alfonso, did you use a 4 also?
Yeah.
Okay, when you punch this into your calculator, 1 divided by 1 over 6 plus 1 over 7, what did you get?
The first one, I got 0.309.
And when you try on B, what do you get?
I get 3.20.
And what do you okay. And what happens when you try it on A?
Oh, I need to try it on A. I got the 0.309.
So if we did this right, you have a perfect match and A would be the answer. I'm now going to check the normal math way. We made it the 4. I still like the 4. If I had to do this problem on the SAT in the non-calculator section, because that's the other difference between the exam, they have one math section which doesn't allow a calculator, I would need to have a common denominator. So, Alfonso, if that's a 6 and that's a 7, I'm allowed to multiply anything by 1, even if it's a different version of 1, like 5 over 5 is 1. What would you multiply 1/6 by to give it the same denominator we're going to be having here? Do you know?
By 7.
Yes. If we multiply it by 7 over 7, and if we multiply this one by 6 over 6, we're going to get a common denominator. And they always talked about how they loved common denominators in school. The bottom is now going to say 7 over 42 plus 6 over 42. Do you agree with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Now on the top, we had a 1 before, but I want to have the common denominator. Since the common denominator is 42, I'm going to multiply this times 42 over 42. Did that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay, because it's about you right now, man, not about me. Now I have 42 over 42 over 7 over 42 plus 6 over 42. The cool thing is when everything has a common denominator, you can ignore the denominators completely. They disappear. The question says 42 over 13, which is that. Now, what this is telling me, something was done wrong when it was being punched into the calculator here, because 42 over 13 matches the real answer, which is B. This 0.309 is what happens when we flip it upside down. So I think when you punched it into the calculator, it was punched upside down somehow. Let's try this the same way I was taking her through it before. I want you to punch this into your calculator.
Okay.
1 divided by,
Okay.
open parentheses, 1 divided by 6, close parentheses, plus, open parentheses, 1 divided by 7, close parentheses, and then hit equals and tell me what you get.
I get 3.2307.
There it is. So now here's something I'm going to point out. Something that you did and the girl before you did when you punched into your calculator was incorrect. Normally in my course, what I would do is I would try to have us identify what was the thing you did wrong on your calculator. Because if you make that mistake on this problem, you've made that mistake on 10 problems in the last year in school, and your score was lower on your math tests. So knowing how to use your calculator correctly will also be an essential thing for doing well on the test. This matches the same thing that you came up with, the same thing that this is. And it will match answer choice B perfectly, which is when she punched into B, that's the number that she said before.
Yeah.
So does this make sense?
Yes.
All right. Plug in, you make up numbers to make your life easier. Making it numbers here makes it easier to work it out on paper. Making it numbers makes it easier to punch it into your calculator. And if you can make the problem an easier problem, then you can get more questions right. The test has easy questions, medium questions, and hard questions. And the hard questions, if you use the plug-in strategy, it changes them into easier medium questions, and they make them something that's more doable. Even if when you were looking at this as an algebra problem, your brain was starting to seep fluid out of your ears, which we don't want that to happen on the exams. So point with plugin, when you see variables in the answer choices, it's the most common situation for when you can just make up a number to make the setup part of the problem true, get yourself the target that you're looking for, and then go hunting for it in the answer choices. I'm going to erase this, and then we're going to move on. So summarizing that part up, there was a school way of doing this problem. There was an SAT, ACT, and there was an even more complicated way where we wouldn't have made up numbers and we'd have had a common denominator with variables instead. All three of those ways of handling that, if you have all three of them in your pocket when you take your test, you have three ways of getting to the answer. You're more likely to get a much higher score because more problems are things within our range. Now, the next thing I have there is this, to answer or not to answer? That is the question in the Shakespearean SAT and ACT. In school, if you answer 2/3 of the questions right, it's about 66, 67%. I think in most schools it's a D now. It used to be an F, but then Jeb Bush changed the grading scale. Thank you, Jeb. If you got 2/3 right in the test and you left the other third out, most of you would not be happy with that D score. Most of you would be calling tutoring firms saying we need help desperately. The question is, what happens on the SAT and ACT if we do the same thing? Where it says question number 5, I want you to copy the following question down. What is 2/3 of 40? Everybody copy that down in question number 5 on your handout. There are 40 questions in the reading section on the ACT. So my curiosity is, what would happen if you answered 2/3 of the questions right on the ACT, and then you left the other 1/3 out, something that would be really bad and it would be a D in school? Let's work this out. For those of you who don't know how to work this out, every word in this sentence can be changed from English into math. When you have a problem like this, the word what always means a variable. So you have to make up a variable. Most of you are writing down the letter X right now. Always avoid X. A, it's too much cholesterol if you have X for breakfast. And number 2, X looks like the multiplication sign as well as a variable, and people get confused in the middle of the exam. I prefer N. The word is means equals. 2/3 means 2/3. Of means times. And people sometimes forget what of means, so I tell them to hug themselves in the middle of the exam. You go like this. I of you. I of, and then you stop at the of, and you look at your chest. There's an X. So it tells you that of means times. I've taken the test before with some of my students in the same room, and I see them like hugging themselves occasionally. And then 40 means 40. So now we can figure out the answer. It says N equals 2/3 times, oh, I'm going to put this over 1. I hate having whole numbers and fractions in the same problem. Punch 2/3 times 40 into your calculators, my friends.
How do you do that? Put a fraction in a calculator again.
The fraction key. Your calculator, graphing calculators don't have this. They have other ways of doing it. It's this fraction key. You would write 2 fraction, the ABC, 3, and then you hit times 40, and you could just hit times 40. You could do 40 over 1. And when you punch it in, what do we get? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 26.6 if you did it right, which rounds to 27. And for you just had a reaction. I'm sorry. You did a reaction because you got 80 over 3 as your fraction, or you got 26 2/3. Is that what it says in your calculator? It says 26, a symbol, a 2, a symbol, and a 3. They all mean the same thing. 26 2/3 rounds to 27, which means if you got 2/3 of the questions right in the reading section on the ACT and you left 1/3 out, you would have a 27 score out of 40. Now I have in my hand here an ACT scoring table for a typical test. And if I take a look under the reading column, and normally I hand this out at my free workshops, but that's when we're live. I trace a look down to 27 for the reading, and I move it to the right, it says that I would get a 24 score. So on question number 5, where it says, so 2/3 right, 1/3 omitted on the ACT could be, I want you to write a 24 in that blank. A 24 is the equivalent, if it was on the entire test on the SAT, it's equivalent of about an 1180. Since 1,000 is an average score in the SAT, that means if you got 2/3 right and you left 1/3 out, you have a score that's already way above average and already coming close to the first of the 2 Bright Future scholarships. The range, because each test is curved, could be anywhere from a 21 to a 27, depending upon the test. A 21 would be a 1080 on the SAT. A 27 would be a 1280 on the SAT. So that ain't so bad to get a 2/3 on the exam. And that's not even counting the fact that if you guessed on the other third, you get a few of those right and your score would be even higher. Let's do the same thing. I just showed you how to change word problems into math problems. So what if we do the same thing on the math section on the SAT? There are 58 questions in math on the SAT. So I'm erasing my work. You have to work this out on your own. What is 2/3 of 58? Work it out. And whoever gets it first can unmute and talk to me.
I got 38 and 2/3, so I'm guessing that means 39.
Bingo. It's a 39. So 39 would be getting 2/3 of the math questions right, 1/3 left out. And if I take a look at this one, that would be a 600 score on the SAT. Where it says 2/3 right, 1/3 admit on the SAT math, it would be a 600, which would be about 25 on the ACT. And the range would be a 560 through a 640, which is a 22 to a 27 on the ACT. So the whole notion as to whether you have to answer every question, if somebody's here right now and your score on the last SAT or PSAT that you took was an 800, you could answer just 2/3 of the test, focus your energies in getting those right. You could ignore the other third completely, and you still have the potential of going up 400 points to a 1200. And then with the ones that you guess on the later ones, maybe you could even get far further than that. Unless you're starting with a score of 1550. Nobody has to be aiming for perfection on the exams. You don't need to get a perfect score in order to get into colleges. In fact, I've spoken to college admission counselors at the colleges who have said they prefer to have somebody who does not have a perfect SAT and does not have a perfect GPA rather than somebody who's been perfect in everything. Because the person who's been perfect in anything, they're concerned the first time they get a B, they're going to develop real psychological problems. They want to know that you can handle maybe a little bit of imperfection. Do we have to answer every question? No, we do not. You want to focus on quality work before you focus on quantity work. I'm going to go backwards in time because I skipped question number 3 and question number 4. So I want to talk about the school and SAT methods of doing reading comps. There was a reading comp homework assignment that I gave all you to do. I don't know how many of you actually did it, but somebody who did it, unmute yourself. Let me have somebody new.
I did it.
Okay, so you're going to help me out here. Turn to the reading section. Tell me one, I'm going to read to you all the answers right now. Everybody's going to have the answers so that they know what they got right and what they didn't get right. Check to see whether you got right or not. Number 11 is B. Number 12 is F. 13 is D. 14 is J. 15 is D. 16 G. 17 A. 18 F. 19 C. And 20 is H. So, Aditi, I like you. I don't know if I pronounced it right, but I give it my best shot. And it's really, how do you live just with the top half of your head? Oh, you have a full face. I feel so much better now. I've never worked with people with only half a head. Tell me one question that you did not get right.
Out of all of them, I missed 15 and 16 because I didn't do it, but out of all of them that I did do, I got all of them right.
Okay, I like that. Congratulations, high five. See, this is the social distance version of high-fiving. So let's just pick number 15. And I'm going to talk about when we handle these. The trick on the SAT and the ACT, this is not about a memorization test for reading comp. You don't have to read really carefully the first time through. The SAT and the ACT, the reading comps, are basically hide and seek problems. They hide information in the passage. How fast can you find it? And the way I tell my students to do their reading comps is a way that's alien to them. I want them to actually show work on paper, which nobody does in reading comps. Sometimes they do it in math. I want them to do it in reading as well. And you go back and you find the evidence. Read me number 15, because I don't know how to read for the moment.
It can be reasonably inferred from the passage that at the time ER was working for social reform, the United States was...
Now, our job would be, we read it twice to ourselves to make sure we get what they want. So I'm going to read it one more time. Okay, ER, by the way, for those of you who didn't read this, is Eleanor Roosevelt. So when she began working for the social reform, something about the United States. Now your job would be to go through the passage as fast as possible to find where they talk about when she first began working for social reform. Now, do you happen to know where it is? If not, I'm gonna help you out.
Yeah, it's on the
About line what?
fifth paragraph, line 38 to
Okay.
30.
I love that. In fact, I'm going to hold this up to you right now, and I'm going to show you question number 15. If you guys can see me holding it, you'll notice that next to number 15, I have it D circled. I have numbers 33 to 38 right next to it, which means the evidence that I found to prove D is right is on those lines. So I'm going to have you read those lines to me, 33 to 38. You pointed out 38, so I'm going to go a little bit earlier than that. Let's check to see if when she began, the United States was unsupportive of the idea that the government was responsible for the welfare of its poor and neglected. Read to me.
National politics since the 1880s for public health, universal education, community centers, sanitation programs, and government responsibility for the welfare of the nation's poor and neglected people.
Okay, I will just point out you started in the middle of a sentence, and it's always good to start at the very beginning. Because if you go a little bit further, it says that ER's mentors since 1903, they had battled on the margins of national politics. And then they listed all those things. So if they're on the margins of national politics, is the United States focusing on these issues that they were concerned about?
No.
Exactly. So do you feel that those lines, 33 to 38, said that the government was not really supportive of this idea that we had to support the poor and neglected?
Yeah.
Then you would write those 33 to 38 directly next to it. In fact, on the handout, where on the question I skipped, question number 3, where it says, where's the proof for question number 15, you can write the word 15, and you can write answers, lines 33 to 38. Our job when you do the reading comps on these exams is to find the evidence for something, and my job is to help people to learn how to find it faster and faster. And then the questions we get wrong, is there anybody who did question number 15, and you chose A or B? If there is, hit your space bar. Oh, wait a moment. Going once. Going twice. Okay, then I have nobody who went that route. For A and B, I'm going to hold this up. Again, you'll notice that I've crossed off those answers and I have line numbers next to those as well. There's an old expression that our great-grandparents used to say. They would say, the devil is in the details. And I know if I sound exactly like your grandmother, I apologize for having imitated her too well. That expression meant to try to determine what's good versus what's bad, you pay attention to the details. The line numbers that I wrote next to B, for instance, I wrote 63 to 64. It proves that B is wrong. So I've had students in the past who chose B on this problem, and then I said, let's see if we can find the evidence that shoots it down. This is all about hide and seek. They hide information. They also put things in there that will help you to disprove some of the other answer choices. Do you have to prove every answer wrong? No. If you find proof for something being right, you're done. But if you can't, you can still find evidence to dump all the other answer choices. That's the goal in reading comps, finding evidence and not going by memory. This is not a memorization test. I'm going to go to the next question, question number 4, the other thing that I skipped earlier. I'd like you all to just circle the answer that you think is right. All right, I'll tell you the right answer first. The right answer is C. I want anybody who chose A, B, or D to activate your screen.
Yeah.
Okay, what did you choose?
B.
You chose B? Now, I'm going to point out, because in the grammar section, the key is learning what types of things they use to trick you so you can watch for them in the future. That's part of the identifying individual strengths and weaknesses, which is the last thing on the outline in B. I mean, in Roman numeral 2. So I'm going to point out that there's 2 things that are affecting your getting this wrong. One of them is subject-verb agreement. The other one is prepositional phrases, which is where understanding prepositions will help. Prepositions tell you how one part of the sentence relates to another part. And I'm going to ask you to take your pencil. Everybody do this even if you got it right. I want you to open a parenthesis right before the word that in the sentence. Open a parenthesis. Physically write it down on the page. And then I want you to close the parentheses at the word cities. That is sent to landfills in many larger cities. That's actually 3 different prepositional phrases that were strung together as one. On these exams, they use prepositional phrases to try to distract you from other issues. When you did this, you chose B. You chose B because you're thinking landfills are contributing, or you're thinking cities are contributing. But the landfills and the cities are not the subject. They're part of a prepositional phrase designed to distract you. I would like you, Kayla, I would like you to read me the sentence without all the stuff we just parenthesized and with your answer choice.
Organic material are contributing to
Stop.
the
You like it still?
no.
Because you wouldn't say organic material are, you would say organic material is. Or you might say organic material contributes, because now we have a subject-verb agreement. It's the 1S rule that if the noun has an S, the verb usually, not always, but usually does not. And if the noun doesn't have an S, the verb usually does. Material does not have an S, is or contributes do. You can get the answer right once you've learned to sift out the distractor phrase that they had in there. So that was that one. I'm going to move on. Difficulty levels. Throughout the test, every section has an easy, a medium, and a hard third to them, and there are qualitative differences to them. The easy thirds are there to try to make sure that even if you do everything wrong, you get a few things right so that you do better than a rock taking the exam. Humans have to do better than inanimate objects, otherwise the people who make the test get fired. The hard questions are there to trick you. They're not always hard, but they're sometimes there to trick you into thinking you're getting them right when you're not. And I'm going to demonstrate that with question number 7 and question number 8. So I want everybody to participate in this one. Parents, students, pet gerbils. As long as they can hold a pen, they should participate. Copy this question. This is question number 7. If n equals 2 squared, then n must be, don't call out. First, everybody has a chance to work it out, cogitate, use your calculators if you need to, or just stare at the screen saying, dude, this is a really easy question. I got it already. If anybody has the answer, unmute. Share with me what you think the answer is.
I think it's 4.
Absolutely, because you know that when they say to do 2 squared, you're supposed to multiply that number times that number to get the answer, right?
Right.
No, I'm lying to you.
No? Okay.
No, you're supposed to add these numbers to each other, right?
No.
Oh, you're supposed to multiply the top number by itself the bottom number of times, right? I'm playing games with you. You know how to do this, but I'm confusing you right now. But the point is, even on this question, it is an easier question, but I'm still getting it right, doing it wrong ways. You don't add those numbers. You knew that. And if I had this one, 3 squared, would you have done 3 times 2?
No.
You would have done this number times itself, right?
Yes.
Exactly. You know how to do it right. I clearly don't, which is why I just said the wrong way 3 different ways. But this one's designed so even if I do it incorrectly, like add those numbers or multiply this number by itself that number of times instead of the other way around, which you clearly know how to do, I'll still get the question right. That's a typical easier question. You can do it wrong and still potentially get it right. You could get this wrong if you really try hard. You could divide the 2 numbers and get A, 1. You could get excited that there's 2 2s and you could just circle B. You could circle D because you say, oh, it's a number on the slant. So there are ways to still get it wrong, but there are also ways to get it right doing it incorrectly. I'm going to give you all one more try, like one more problem just like that. We're going to do question number 8 now. Copy this one down. And what you got? If W squared equals 9, then W must be, copy that down, work it out, cogitate, stare at it, scratch your head, look at me like, dude, you just gave us the same problem but with different numbers, whatever you want. Somebody else, Tell me if you got C. Somebody else, unmute. Help me out.
Yeah, I got C.
Thank you, Demi. Because you know that when they say W squared, you write 3 squared equals 9, right? Right?
Yeah.
Now, what if I told you, Demi, that this was the hardest question on a recent SAT exam? Would you think I was lying to you again?
Yeah.
Okay, it was the hardest question in an exam. And having said that, most of you would be, sometimes at my workshops, I'll bet people $1,000 that they got this wrong. You say it's answer choice C, 3. I say you're wrong. So Demi, I'm going to stay with you for a moment. Is there anything else that W could have been besides 3?
Yeah.
What?
Go.
So -3 or?
Wait, no, it can't be -3 because -3 times -3 is -9, right?
No.
Oh, I forgot. A negative times a negative is a positive. So my question for you is, can we tell whether W is 3 or whether W is -3? Answer is no, we can't.
No.
The answer on this one is E. Cannot be determined.
Oh, okay.
2 out of every 3 SATs and ACTs, they will try to pull this question on at least one problem, where they'll try to trick you into only thinking of the positive and not thinking of the negative. Now, the moment I told you guys that this was a hard question, and on the math sections on both exams, they go roughly in order of difficulty. If you know you're in the hard section and you're getting the question right so quickly that you say, oh my goodness, it's like I got this in 2 seconds, I didn't have to do any work. Instead of thinking, oh, I'm doing great, you should immediately be thinking, they're tricking me. What did I miss? And that's dealing with the difficulty levels and the structure of the exam. If you know where the easies and the mediums and the hards are, strategies that would have been perfectly fine on an easy question will not be the same on a hard one. There's 2 other things on the ways to try to beat the exam. One of them is called the devious approach. It's basically circumventing the integrity of the exams. I call it legal cheating. I don't believe in real cheating, but there are ways to do math problems without understanding the mathematical concepts behind them. There are ways to do reading comps without having to read the passage. I'm going to show you one such thing on question number 9. It's called the sucker strategy. And I'd like you to try to work out question number 9. See if you can figure out the answer. This is from the hard third of a previous SAT exam. See if you can get this one right before I'm done writing the problem on the board. Go for it. Those of you who have an answer, I'm willing to bet that the vast majority of you say the answer is A. Now, if you say the answer is A, I'm teaching you something called the sucker strategy. I'm not teaching you how to do this problem yet. The sucker strategy only works on hard problems on the exam. And it works under the concept that they are trying to trick you into choosing an answer that's not correct on the hard third problems. So on this one, you look at this question, and I don't care about all that other stuff. It says 42 minus 40. The answer's got to be 2. I'd like you all to slash off answer choice A and write an S for sucker. It can't be right in the hard third because it's too obvious. It's almost screaming, pick me, pick me! Anybody else think there's another answer choice that seems so obvious it would be screaming, pick me at you without having to work it out? If there is, press your space bar now.
42.
42, because it's the first number there. It says 42, and then it has dash 40. The first one's the only one that matters. C must be the answer. So everybody slash it off, put an S for sucker. Everybody got another one? Something else that you think would probably scream out at you if you didn't know how to do the problem, but you think it must be that.
41.
What are the 2 numbers that they're asking you about? 42 and 40. And there's a dash in between. What goes in the dash?
41.
41. It must be the answer. Everybody slash it off. Put an S for sucker. These are 3 answer choices they try to trick us into picking. Sometimes I will have people say, well, D, because if you add the 42 and the 40, you get 82. That must be the answer. I like a little slash it off. It's a sucker answer. So the real answer is E. The only one that I can't look at this question and say, how would you come up with that number? This is an actual SAT problem. 4 of them you could dump just using the sucker strategy, knowing how they designed the test. Now, just for the sake of pointing out, how would you have done this question if you were actually trying to do it the mathematical way? The problem says f of x, it's function of x. When they say the first time a function, the thing in the parentheses has got to be the x. So they're telling you in the future, if you see something with an f in front of it, the thing in the parentheses is x. So when I see f of 42, the 42 is x. And I have to put the 42 into every single x, just like I did with the plugins. So I put a 42 over there, a 42 over there, a 42 over there, and a 42 over there. And now I know that f of 42 is 42 plus, well, 42 minus 1 is 41, plus 42 minus 2 is 40, plus 39, all the way down until we get to 1. And then I have to do it for the 40 also. I put a 40 into all the x's. And now I know that f of 40 is 40 plus 39 plus 38 all the way down to 1. So if I was going to try to do it the mathematical way, I'd have to add up all of those numbers, hit equals, write it down, add up all those numbers, hit equals, subtract the 2 of them. And if I did it right and I didn't make any careless mistakes, I'd get 83. Now, is there anybody who wants to say, yeah, but that would take too long in the middle of a timed test? I agree. And here's something else you need to know. When you take the SAT and the ACT exams, if you think you have to punch in 50 to 100 numbers into your calculator to solve it, they built a sneaky backdoor, a way to get it really quickly that only the people who think exactly like the test makers will see, and where everybody else will not notice it. For instance, in these 2 lists, this is from 40 to 1. This is from 42 to 1. If you ask yourself what's in both of the lists, everything from 40 all the way down to 1 is in both lists. So without having to write them all out, if I added all those up and subtracted all of these, all of this would cancel out. And all that's left is 42 plus 41, which is 83. So there was a long school way of doing it. There was a sneaky way of doing it if you understand how they think. And there was also the sucker strategy where if you got stuck on this question, you could have still dumped out answer choices. And the reason why I chose this one is because 4 of the 5 answer choices were suckers. And so it really drives home the point. That's the devious approach. The other thing, identifying individual strengths and weaknesses, I already mentioned earlier, but I'll bring it up again. No matter how closely matched a class is, every single human being has different strengths and weaknesses. And part of what you want to do in the course is to be able to identify them. In the grammar section of my course, I have a chart, and I have people do a few grammar sections through the course at the beginning of the course. And we try to identify what types of issues they have going on. Like, for instance, Kayla, I know that you may have issues with subject-verb agreement and prepositional distractor phrases. So if that turned out to happen on the first few practice tests we do, then the chart will start showing that that's a weakness of yours. And now you can start focusing on studying that particular weakness and then watching for it on the next practices. And all of a sudden, it's no longer a weakness because you've mastered something that was previously a problem. The other sections in the manual, there are pages in my manual where people get things wrong. I say, go to that page, write down the description of the problem, the page number, and what the solution is that you need to remember. And then you need to keep on reviewing this over and over again. If you keep on reviewing it, it's no longer a weakness, it becomes a strength. Let me tell you a little bit about my program and what we have to offer you, and then guide you into certain things on my website as well. First of all, we are Higher Standards SAT, ACT specialists. That's what we do. If you decide to take our course, you'll be working with me exclusively. I will not pass you on to somebody else who was given a crash course in my methods, which means that if you can handle my humor, if you can handle this face being what you have to look at, and if you can handle somebody who might occasionally jump wrong, which is what I did earlier today, then you want to take our course. My qualifications, I've been doing this for over 30 years now. I usually get perfect scores in the exams. When I make a couple of mistakes, I drop down maybe to a 1550 instead of a 1600. Oh, I know, now I lost your total respect. At a live workshop, I'd have picture boards with all the people who worked with me in the last 2 years, and you'd go through them, you'd pick 10 people from your school and say, oh, I know him, oh, I know her, oh, I hate him. But hopefully none of the hate thing will come up. but I can always give references if you needed to. If you want to see more about the qualifications on my website, you can find, there's something which says About Us and /testimonials. You can go there. They describe my history, PhD, what I've been teaching, and you can also click on the link and you'll see some people's comments about the course. Schedules and course recommendations. I've got 2 courses coming up. One of them is our summer fall course. One of them is our fall winter course. Both of them you can see on the website. When you go there, if you go to where it says schedules/registration, there you'll see our mailing address. You'll see the different course schedules which you can print out, download whatever you want, and there are also PayPal links if you want to reserve a space in the course. I will say, if you are thinking of joining the course, I limit the number of people in the course typically to 30 people. So if you know you want to take the course, you want to put a $50 deposit down as soon as possible. That reserves your space in the course, and it gets applied towards the tuition. The comprehensive course is $1,295. It has at least 67 hours of preparation in it. During the summertime, the summer fall course meets twice a week. It meets on Sundays and on Wednesdays, so that I can get the bulk of the training done during the summertime before people have, these students have way too much on their plates as it is.
Yeah.
But I don't like having weekday classes during the school year. If you take a look at the other schedule, the fall winter, there's no weekday classes. It's only on the weekend because you guys are already stressed up. I don't need you to come home and have another 2.5-hour class if I can avoid it. I've got 2 different sections aimed towards different scoring levels. The verbal lessons are the same. The science lessons are the same in both sections. The difference is in the math. I move at a slightly more accelerated rate for students whose math scores have been substantially higher already. For normal human being scores, I move at a more normal human being rate. If you take a look at the schedule, you'll see there's 2 different groups, and it'll say which one is the higher scoring group and which one is the normal scoring group. And then once the school year starts, it switches to weekend only. My plan is, even if we do the course through Zoom, to still follow that schedule because there's a lot of curricula I want to give you. I don't want to cut any training out. The course recommendations. If you are going into your senior year next year, the one you should be taking is the summer fall course because it's the one that's going to get you most prepared before the exams that are coming up in the fall. The other course, the fall winter course, starts in September. It doesn't end until the spring, which will be after a lot of your deadlines. If you're going into your junior year this upcoming year, either one of the courses is good for you. If you have a really high score and you think you have a shot at the National Merit Scholarship or one of the other 2 scholarships that I mentioned, then you might want to also focus on the summer course. Third reason to do the summer one would be that you want to get the bulk of your training done during the summertime. The fall course, if you want to extend your training for later on into your school year and you don't want to be cramming everything in so early, the fall course is better. Both of them have the same exact curricula. Supplemental tutoring, I just tell you, we do help people with tutor for the SAT as well and the ACT, but I don't do it privately the whole course. I do it after people have taken the course. Most of the time people are happy with their scores and they don't need anything else. But if you want to go a little bit further beyond the training, then I can do a little private work also. It costs $125 an hour. It's much more cost efficient to be in the course and hopefully to nail the scores you want. And then sometimes I'll have follow-up courses after the course, which are a few sessions for people who want to brush up on their skills for a later exam. For people who want to continue to push their scores further, because many people don't want to take the full course again, they just want to do extra classes. And the follow-ups, they do practice tests for homework, and then we analyze them together to see where their weaknesses are so that we can keep on building. We also help people with preparing their college essays. And if you want more information about that, send me an email because I'm going to try to cut a couple of things out to come closer to ending on time. Manual. This is the course manual. Everybody gets it. It's just handed to you on the first day of the class if we meet live. If we have to meet virtually, now we'll arrange a pickup day where I'll just be sitting somewhere. You can pick it up, and then you'll get your binder so we all have the same material. There are 2 other books you would also need for the course. One of them is this one, the official ACT prep guide. We want to get the latest version of that. The other one is this one, the official SAT prep guide. Both of them are made by the testing companies. They're the only books on the market that have real SAT and ACT questions. I want you to think like the test makers not like somebody who made a book. I want you to be able to think like me on the test, but not me in the real world, because that would destroy your social life. I do assign homework. I can teach you how that is means equals and of means times here, but if you can't do it for homework, you also can't do it in the exam. So I do give homework. It's not an outrageous amount. If we had a 3-hour class, I might give you 2 hours of homework that would be due 4 days later or a week later. So it's not horrible if you spread it out. It is horrible if you wait until an hour before the class. Attendance is important also. If I have my classes live, I do videotape every one of my classes, and people can come to my home and watch the makeup videos for just $10. If I have to do it online, I believe I'm going to be finding a way to videotape it for every one of the classes so people can catch the makeup video through YouTube, and I'll give you a private link if you miss. Locations. So that's locations. There's a guarantee in the course also. If people don't get at least a 100-point increase by the end of the school year, or 2 points on the ACT from where they were beforehand, they can take the course again for $50. I believe in standing behind people. The people who do take the course again almost always got the increase, and they want to take it again anyway. And people want to take the course again after getting the increase, they can still do it for half price. How to enroll. If you know you want to take the course, go to my website, to the schedules registration page, and get your space reserved then. And then we'll ask for additional information, other email addresses, score information. I'm glad you all were here. I hope you got a lot out of this. And I hope I get to work with a lot of you. And there you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If anybody wants to say goodbye, feel free to say goodbye. Give me a fist bump. Just don't do it too hard or you'll break your screen.
Goodbye. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. It was good working with you, and I hope to see you, see you more than just an N again in the future. You do have a face other than the N, right?
I do.
Thank goodness.
Wonderful. You have been amazing. Thank you.
You too.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we'll get emails from you, like for how it's going to start. You're going to keep us updated, right?
A few weeks before the course, I'll send out a collection of 10 emails, which will give you all the information you need. One of them is talking about materials you need. One is talking about locations. So everything you'll need is in those emails.
Okay, perfect. Great. So looking forward to it. You sound like a fun teacher.
I hope so.
I wish I had one like that when I applied to college.
I prefer being called a fun teacher than a fun guy, because when I'm a fun guy, I'm a mushroom.
Wonderful. Well, great. Very exciting. And I will, also share this with other moms if they have not registered or done something, and that they can contact you.
Okay.
I was very impressed with the workshop today, and thank you so much.
Thank you. I look forward to working with your son.
Thank you very much. Have a really nice evening.
You too.
Bye-bye.